All right. Hi, everybody. So super excited. I have Eric here again. If any of you have been listening to the podcast, you know Eric was with Seven Side Productions. He does super cool stuff, wedding videos. He works with us a lot. So if you're one of our brides, you may recognize Eric. If you're in a metal band, maybe Eric filmed your video. If you follow us on social media and I asked you, what question should I ask somebody who does wedding and metal? Do you ever start a mosh pit in the church? Yeah. This is him. This is Eric.
The two extremes, right?
The two extremes, love and the... So thank you. Eric brought me this super cool picture of the Milky Way. Also in the foreground, we don't know if it's an alien or an extraterrestrial just mocking him, looking like he's taking a picture. So he didn't know that I'm in conspiracy theories, but he has my heart for bringing me an image of a conspiracy theory.
We dove into a black hole shortly before the podcast started.
Yes, we did. So thank you so much. So Eric, the last time you were here, you were talking about your business and how you're growing your business and moving it forward. So do you want to talk a little bit about like what your journey was? Like once you went from that, maybe transitional phase to where I have a day job, but I also have this hobby that's making me some pretty good money. And then what you've experienced in that transition as you've taken it from a hobby which makes you some money into like, wow, this is actually something I could do for the rest of my life.
Yeah, so I guess officially becoming an LLC, what I learned, is working in the business, right? So primarily being the one taking on all of the jobs, pulling all the leads, doing all of your marketing, being out in the field and just gaining tons of experience and tons of experience. And in this year versus, I guess, when it was more of a hobby, I started to see a lot more volume, right? And now I find I'm crazy between my business and my job. I'm working anywhere from like 85, 95 hours a week, some weeks. So what I'm venturing into this year is finding a way to not work in the business as much, find a way to pull myself outside of the business and run the business. And what I mean by that is taking the tasks and the things that I don't have the time to do anymore, much like the social media marketing, and finding ways to outsource that work so that way you start developing a team using the capital that you've earned as a freelancer and will continue to earn to just invest right back. At this point, even turning a profit's not even my main goal. It's just taking that money that I'm earning and investing it right back into the business to hire people to market the content better, really trying to focus on content creation to pull more leads and pull more people in, and then eventually have start building systems, creating systems where I contract other videographers out. Whether I continue to do the editing or not, be able to fulfill a lot of that volume and not miss out. Because I find as I'm scaling up that there's more demand coming in and there's a lot more customers coming in, but I need to make sure I can fulfill that.
Yes, therein lies the rub, right? You get the business and then you're like, oh, now I have to do the business. So where are you? And if you don't feel comfortable talking about this, if your day job happens to listen to the podcast, where do you find yourself with that balance? Is it something that you envision quitting the day job and doing this full time? Or do you like having the security of having a steady income and then looking to maybe using all that scaling up or hiring out as a way to supplement the work so that you can maintain both?
Yeah, so I'd say to be able to go out. Eventually, I would like to just have my business, of course, would be the goal. I would need to earn significantly more to make up for the advantages I have working a job, which is
or you
obviously
could just
paying
always
for the
marry a sugar mama
and the and the benefits involved. So I would need to make significantly more. But I think the function of the job right now is just to have the seed capital to invest into my business, which has already worked very well.
Right.
If I just went into my business, I wouldn't have as much capital to make those exponential jumps that I'm doing.
Yes.
And it's covering my bottom line. So essentially, all of the money from my job originally was getting invested into the business. Now, all of the money from my job just covers my bottom line, covers everything that needs to take care of me. All of the income from the business, I'd say right now, even this past year, 80% of it went right back in.
That's how I was too. I think I might have mentioned this to you. Now granted, I was in a little bit of a different situation because I was married and had a husband who very, very graciously was like, I'll work all the time so you can stay home with our kids. And then I'm like, well, instead of just staying home with my kids, I'm going to make a business. But I did the same thing for probably the first 3 years. I really invested everything back into the business. And around year 3, I started having money to spend. But my my goal was that I always wanted the business to pay for the business. I didn't want to pull on personal funds to cover the business. And I think that's like a really wise thing, because every once in a while I'll see somebody, he was a photographer, and you'll see people and they'll go out and they buy this beautiful equipment that I'm, like in this industry, you'd probably say like, oh, she's successful in this industry. And even like somebody like me, like I'm jealous. I'm like, oh my gosh, how'd you get that camera? Like, yeah. I want that camera. And you see people who aren't making the money yet going out and buying all this stuff. And then like, it doesn't always work out, and not saying that you're not going to work out, but it's just nice. It's just nice knowing you're not putting yourself in a financial bind for something that you hope works out.
Yeah. And it's a tough, teeter, assessing the risk involved with it and knowing if it's going to be worth it. I try to use others to learn from, mistakes wise, to see what they've done. Did it work for them? Did it not? I take in all instances of it working and not working, and then use that to make an educated decision.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things. And I noticed that about you, just like your openness, like, hey, Deanna, what do you think about this? And I'm like, oh, well, if you want to ask. And it's something that I've done, actually. Like, just even, like, as we're working with jobs, you've probably seen me do it. I'm always chit-chatting with the DJs and stuff. One, because you want to have a good relationship. But two, there's lots of successful people out there. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how much people are just willing to help. Like, if you ask somebody, hey, what worked for you? They'll tell you. So, like, why reinvent the wheel when you have successful people willing to share that with you? So that's super awesome. And you were telling me a little bit while we were talking about Tataria and the mud flood and other conspiracy-related things that you've got, like, a lot of really exciting goals coming up. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like, how you're thinking about, like, implementing those goals? You were talking about being able to outsource and build. Do you have anything right now that you're actively working on that maybe you're using? For anybody who's not familiar with this industry, this is like when you watch Game of Thrones, winter is coming. Yeah. It's real. It's very, very real. You don't make money in the winter, which is no fun at all, to not make a lot of money, but then also like you have that opportunity. It's like, right, I'm not just spending my life staring at my computer. I can use this chance to work on marketing like we did. Like you're like, hey, we can stop and we can do a podcast, but I've got like a lot of great ideas that I wanted to talk to you about that we can kind of work on. So do you want to talk like a little bit about like how you're thinking about implementing those things or challenges that you think you might have or just excited about doing? Yeah.
So obviously to reiterate, the winter is difficult, but the good news is that you can leverage your time now, right? So in the busy season, which even with the music videos I do, they line pretty closely to the wedding industry.
Oh, do they?
You see between like April and like October, November, that's like your hot season.
Right.
There's a lot of things going on. But now it sucks because, if you haven't you haven't gauged that yet, or you've not been in the industry long enough to know your cycle, and when you do your best and when you don't do as well. once you figure that out, you can judge ahead of time. I need to save this much money, put this much aside, not overspend this month because I know, coming up in the fall we might have issues if that happens. So utilizing the time you now have to plan, because at least for me with all of the freelancing, that's all I've been doing is just tons of editing. Even say my last gig was in, the end of December, and I have a few in January, but most of January is just editing all the videos that I filmed the past few months. So just giving yourself that time to say, okay, I don't want to be generic and just say, oh, new year and let's plan all this. But for our industry, it is a time to really sit down, evaluate how things went in the past year, and see what can we do better.
Right.
So I guess in terms of my personal plans, reiterating what I was saying earlier about starting to outsource more of my work now that I have more capital to invest.
And that's like an amazing opportunity. Like, imagine maybe even 2 years ago, did you think you'd be sitting here being
Not
like,
at all.
I need to outsource all this work so that I can put more into the business? Like, what? Like, sometimes I know, like, even for myself, I've been doing this for a while, but human nature is real. And I think I was telling you, like, every winter, I'm like, oh, I don't make any money. I suck. Nothing's going to happen. Like, even though it's coming, like, it can be hard to stay, like, motivated and optimistic when, like, the income just isn't coming in because nobody's getting married. But then sometimes it's just, like, looking back, like, when I first started, or for you, like, a couple of years ago, just knowing that you'd be in this situation, it's like, I didn't think this would be humanly possible, and here I am. Like, it's so cool.
Yeah, to be able to hit your mark and then year over year hit the next mark, even coming close to it, is very humbling to myself. Most of the time you beat yourself up constantly, but we really take a step back and go, wow, I accomplished this. Even if in the grand scheme, or and people get stuck comparing themselves to others, which I never recommend. It's good to look inward and say, I did this. That's great. Now let's find all the things that I might not have done as well, or let's find the things on the wish list that we want to put in, this year and go for it. So I get, like I said, a big part of that is now that I have more capital from all the freelancing is finding all the things I've been lacking in, and obviously marketing and creating content's been one of those. So that's kind of, I have like 3 legs, right? So I have the wedding side of things, and number 2, I have the music video side of things. So I kind of want to almost implement the content. I want to have the weddings and the music video stuff kind of separated.
So now, what do you think about that? Because I've seen other businesses where they'll have, and I'll just use Instagram as an example. A very good friend of mine, the owner of I talk about jiu-jitsu all the time. I know I do. Hey, Buggy Choke the World, Renee Souza. So a very good friend of mine who I respect tremendously, Zach Maslany, owner of Finishers MMA 10th Planet Bethlehem. He has separate, like, Instagram accounts, right? He has his tournament one, his personal one, and then he has, like, his jiu-jitsu one. Mm-hmm. And I have, like, a different thing. I have one, Cherryville Photography. It's everything. It's personal, it's photography, it's marketing, it's everything. So do you foresee, and I do it because I figure, like, if people are commenting, I want all the SEO going to one account. But I think, like, I'm fairly unique in that. Like, I noticed that a lot of people, when they're branching out, like weddings and then metal, they'll have 2 separate ones. So have you given, like, thought to that? Were you thinking about, like, really having it separate? Like, one account is this and one is that?
At least, yeah. As far as like the music video stuff and the weddings, I just think they're too far apart that the content I'm marketing on each of them wouldn't attract the other audience.
That makes a lot of sense.
9 times out of 10, it's probably reasonable to assume that if I'm directing, potential wedding clients to a page and it's smothered in screaming vocals, which, is a very niche thing. Now, in your case, I can see how pulling things together works. Like, for example, I have my personal Instagram, and there's a lot of the times where I think my personal and my music video 7th side page could probably be merged. There's a lot of
Right.
similar recurring content on there. So I do see the benefit of merging things together. It's a lot less maintenance and
Right.
to keep track of. For this instance, I want to keep them separate because I want to kind of build them as separate entities.
And that does make sense, because it is like, for me, I have a wedding client and they're gonna have kids at some point, so they would probably want to come in for family portraits. So that does make sense. The two are fairly related, and yours are
two extremes,
pretty separate. So that does make a lot of sense. And then you talked a little bit about how you see yourself, maybe not within the next couple of months, but down the line, growing and expanding and having a team under you, similar to like how we have a team. Like, I don't photograph all the weddings myself. I have outstanding people who work for me. So is that something like you see yourself doing soon, or is it, maybe like scary making that jump? Are you excited to make that jump?
Oh, I'm super excited for that jump. Yeah. So as far as weddings go, I do admire the subcontracting model of being able to, so say you got 5 weddings on the same day,
right?
Having a team, and obviously this comes with risk because you're holding your reputation on the line, but really curating a really strong group of content creators, who have high energy, who know how to network and interact, and really putting that time to find these people and hone in their skills and help them develop as individuals, much, like the journey I'm taking the first few years of being in the business, and basically having that model where, we'll have the volume now, say we've whether it's word of mouth, whether it's paid advertising, we have all this volume. Now we can fulfill all of that, and I have trust in the people that are going out there to do that. So that's kind of similarly to what you do with photography. I'd like to implement for weddings. Music videos, it's a little different because people go to a music video director for their personal taste, and it is the same way with weddings. And I know that's why you keep your editing generally under your umbrella, because that's you, and that piece of you stylistically, can't be emulated as easily. So with music videos, it gets a little more difficult because, one, I'm really passionate about it. I love music. First and foremost, it's what sent me down this whole black hole in the first place. But it'd be a lot harder to subcontract. I suppose I could at one point and have somebody possibly film, and then I could just edit it from there. I could see that happening. I haven't figured that one out as much. So that's kind of so I have the wedding kind of subcontracting model. Music videos, possibly subcontract at some point in time. It's hard, like I said, because I just love it so much.
Right. And it's like work and fun.
Yeah. And then I guess the last thing, and this is a big goal for this year, is trying to secure a studio space for video. So with that, right, so you figure, say I'm loaded up with, anywhere from 4 to 10 gigs in a given month. I have no time. I know that there's other photographers, videographers, other people out there that need space to do work out of. I have it all the time. I'll have somebody message me, we're interested in doing ABC. We don't have a spot, and then I'm trying to look and trying to find places to book. And we found some diamonds in the rough, certainly, but to be able to have my own film studio space that
fully
would be
awesome.
Customizable, right? And that pulls in now not only like the clients I normally pull in, but all the videographers that I'm in competition with now. They become my clients as well,
right?
Like I'm bringing something to the table for them that's solving a problem. To be able to have a space now that it's a videographer setting this up, designing it specifically for what music videos or photo shoots or whatever it may be. Not that they don't exist per se, but
I don't think there's that many of them though, because it's something I always look into. So we have this space right here, which is lovely. It's nice when you're doing small groups, or it's perfect for newborns. But I could never do a video in here. It's just not big enough. And it's one of the things, like, just in photography, right? Like when you're bored, you're like, oh, I wonder what's around. And there are some places, but there's not nearly enough. And they're so few and far between that like me being in central Jersey, I would have to drive like 45 minutes to rent some place by the hour and bring my own stuff. So that's like a super cool thing. Like there's just not that many of them.
Yeah. So like I said, to be able to say, for example, that this would be a perfect example is say on a given Saturday, say I'm out filming a music video, right? And on that same day, say we have a wedding, right? Somebody from my team's taking care of the wedding. I'm taking a portion of that for being the feeder, you know, into that. And then at the same time, I have another videographer utilizing my space on the same day, right? In my studio. And then at that point, you know, I'm making income from all these different areas. And to me, eventually that is what will help me break out of working the 9 to 5.
Right, because you just have that not that it's passive income, but it's like where you're not physically there on the spot working.
You're not in the business, you're managing the business.
And I think for me, that was one of the things. So I used to photograph every single wedding myself, edit every single wedding myself, and like why I truly love what I do. Like it's a super amazing job, right? But if you do anything 7 days a week, 365 days a year, like you're like, oh my gosh, like it's a lot. And I see it, you'll see wedding photographers pop up and then pop away, right? Because you go all in, you get this business, and then it's just like, this is literally all I do. So, like nobody would want a job that was literally every single day of their life, and you weren't allowed to have family time, you weren't allowed to have social time. So what I found was I had the people that could do it, and it was like once I was like comfortable taking that step back, I think it probably like saved my business, right? I don't think anybody could really do something 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, forever, right? Like it just doesn't work. So I feel like also being able to have a team allowed me to do this much longer, like, right? Like do it like well into retirement, because there's no burnout. Like I was able to find that find that balance rather. So like, do you feel like that would be like while you like doing, because you told me one time your crazy schedule with the music videos, like sometimes you'll be like go until 3 a.m. and then you'll wake up at like 10 the next morning. So while like that's fun for a couple of years, like do you think like also that would just kind of like help you extend this business?
100%. Yeah. Avoiding burnout's huge. And if you want to scale up a business, you need to learn how to manage it instead of just doing it all yourself. And it's hard because naturally anyone in this industry has some ego in themselves, you know, like it's like, I want this to be perfect. And to be able to hand your child off to somebody else and make them responsible for it, I can imagine for you is also a tough decision, a tough moving point. But like you just see the rate at things are progressing, and you're like, oh, I need to plan for this soon, or else I'll end up losing business because I don't have the time to respond to people. I'm stuck editing constantly.
Yes.
You know, there's so much that needs to get done for the business that you can't do because you're working in the business, you know. Right.
It's hard to scale up when you're just always playing catch up. And it's true, just like the burnout. Like burnout is real. And if you get burned out, you know, you're really not delivering for your clients either. Like if you're feeling burnt out, you just don't have that energy to give back to them. So yeah, I think that's so true what you just said. So do you have like a timeline that you're hoping to like move forward? Because one of the things that like why I enjoy talking to you, why I enjoy working with you, like Eric is is probably, so I work with a couple different videographers that I enjoy. Not that I don't enjoy working with any of them. I very much enjoy working with all the videographers I work with. However, working with you, like you're inspiring, you're motivated, you want to move it. So Eric is probably the first videographer that we've talked to privately about, like, right, like, how do we build this up? How do we get bundled packages? Like, how do we have more of like a working together partnership rather than I'm just somebody you refer to people. And it's just, you make me feel hyped. I'm like, after I talk to you, that. I'm like, right, let's go 2023. So do you have like broad generalizations, or are you like, right, by the end of this year I want to be here, or you're just like, this is where I'm moving to and I'll know when the time is right?
It's a mix of both. So, I mean, you have your short-term goals and projections that you meet up to. Like 2023, I would like to have a studio space already established and see if I can be successful and break even my first year in, right, with that new business model. Other things, it's as, I guess, the market kind of dictates, So if there's a ton of overflow and a ton of volume coming in from like social media efforts, I'll be immediately reactive to that. Right. So say, all of a sudden, you put out an ad campaign and now we got 40 weddings lined up. Okay.
Be a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Right. We have a lot of work to do. But now we also have a lot more capital. So take that capital and put it right back in towards the next idea or the next thing to build it up and just keep it rolling. Of course, it won't at some point take a little bit for yourself out of it. You've earned it.
Right.
But yeah, so it's kind of a mix of both. I have ideas in my head. Sometimes things will go right as projected, but sometimes there's a lot of, example with 2020, there's a lot of things you're not expecting to happen, right?
Global pandemics and such.
In your industry, things can change, that you have to be reactive. I like to think more times than others, people in general are more reactive than they are proactive.
Right.
It's human nature at the end of the day. So yeah, a mix of both. Obviously set goals for yourself. If you reach them, great. Keep setting more goals. If not, sit down, analyze what went wrong, why you didn't get to a certain place that you wanted to be. Really dig into that. And sometimes it involves reevaluating things too. If something really isn't working, it doesn't mean you have to quit it by any means, but
right,
to be able to find another route that's similar, another avenue.
Like not having a defeatist attitude, just right, that didn't work. How do we fix it?
More failures, the better. Always. And I always hear that when listening to any other podcast that I listen to. Once you identify that failing, is a good thing and that it's a part of it, it's like you want to fail all the time because that's what's going to get you to a better place.
Right. That's where you're going to get to that next level.
And it's cool when you have relationships and partnerships like this, and I also hear this too, is the compounding of failures, right? So if we have a discussion and I made X amount of failures, you made X amount of failures, and those failures are different failures, but just by talking about them,
yes,
we both leverage that in a special way, right? Like,
right.
You don't have to make all the failures I made, I don't have to make all the failures you made,
right.
And ultimately you're better off because of it, because you're getting there twice, 3 times, 4 times as fast.
Right.
And that's one thing I believe in too, is when you start partnering with people, you start expanding your network, you're just saving yourself time in the future by not having to go through the same, tribulations that others have gone through, because you're just learning.
And having the humility to say, I can learn from someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's everything, right? Like just having the humility to say, I don't know it all, but I would love to learn.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Eric, I am so sorry to have to cut it off now, but I have to pick up my daughter. This is my fault. Eric showed up. He offered me this lovely gift, which made me start talking about the mud floods. Check it out on Instagram. Super interesting. Or don't, because you might think I'm a crazy person. But Eric is the owner of Seventh Side Productions. You'll see him directing music videos, filming filming weddings, working alongside with us, hopefully working alongside us even more in 2023. So make sure you're on Instagram. It's just Seventh Side Productions, or
at Seventh Side Prod, PROD.
at Seventh Side Prod, and I'll put it all in the show notes again.
Thank you.
As always, hit us up on the interwebs, cherryvillephotography.com, or at Cherryville Photography, everywhere. Oh, and have you ever started a mosh pit in a church?
Not in a church.
Not
no.
in a church.
Don't want to do
All right.
that.
So we're good, ladies. We're good. Eric will film you walking down the aisle, but he won't throw your flower girl into the pit.
We don't incite that.
No mosh pits at the church unless they wanted it. And then maybe that might be kind of fun.
All my metal bands. Yeah, if you have a wedding, you need photography right here, and I'll film the action. They might not be ready for it, but I will.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it
Thank you so
much.
much.
And bye, everybody.